University, and today I'm going to be talking about negative impacts of tourism on U.S. national parks and western states. So first, I'm going to start off with a quote here by Franklin D. Roosevelt saying, "There is nothing so American as our national parks. The fundamental idea behind the parks is that the country belongs to the people, that it is in the process making for the enrichment of the lives of us all." Franklin D. Roosevelt really believed in national parks and thought they were a significant part of our country's heritage and history, and that they thought that they provided wholesome recreation with the element of natural beauty. He really saw that past generations really benefited off U.S. national parks, and really thought that future generations should be able to do so as well. So millions of tourists are starting to visit U.S. national parks annually, and this growing popularity is starting to have a really big growing concern. This presentation will focus on this growing concern by asking what questions exist and how these negative impacts are arising due to high tourist volumes in U.S. national parks of western states. So first I'm going to go over a little bit of history of U.S. national parks overall in general and where they came up from. So through the Yellowstone Act of 1882, Congress created the first national park, being Yellowstone, for the enjoyment and for the benefit of the people. But shortly after the creation of this national park, the U.S. government continued to create national parks and national monuments, with many of them being in the West. On August 25, 1916, President Woodrow Wilson then created the National Park Service by signing the Organic Act. With creating the National Park Service, this new service was tasked with protecting 35 national parks. But soon after, in 1933, additionally 56 sites were added to the National Park Service under their authority. So the purpose of the National Park Service is to pretty much conserve the scenery and the national historic objects and wildlife, and to provide for the enjoyment of the same in the same manner as such, to leave them unimpaired for future generations to enjoy for themselves as well. So in order for these national parks to do so and to leave these parks unimpaired, the National Park Service has grown to an impressive size of more than 20,000 individuals, which care for all of America's 400 national parks, covering 84 million acres of land in all 50 states. So moving on to the growth of tourism, in 1904 there were around 120,000 visitors to the U.S. national parks annually. But around this time, by mid-century time, tourism was really increasing with tens of millions of people going on road trips, as that becoming the all-American dream and the all-American vacation that was spurring around that time. So according to the National Park Service, in 2017 there were around 330,000 recreation visits, and park attendance has increased about 1.5 billion over the last 5 years. So of 10 national parks receiving the most recreation visits each year, 7 of them are located in western states, being Grand Canyon, Zion, Yellowstone, Grand Teton, Olympic, as well, and Glacier as well. So today's societal norms seem to be contributing this growth in tourism, being technology being one of the main thoughts, which is really starting to have a huge impact in this growth of tourism, being technology, which is starting to decay and put at risk what is loved most about natural parks, being their natural scenery and their environment and wildlife overall. So moving on to concerns about negative impacts of high-volume tourism. The significant growth of high-volume tourism in U.S. national parks and western states is really starting to have a noticeable impact on the parks. And there are many concerns about how this negative impact of high-volume tourism is having a negative impact towards people's experience and a negative impact towards the wildlife and the environment, ecology, and all that as well. These concerns are spurring for the need for innovations such as education and planning in order to work towards and diminish these impacts of these negative impacts towards national parks through high tourist volumes. So the National Park Service is really working hard at doing this by creating a bunch of different strategies and impacts towards people to help them from creating more diminishing factors towards national parks. So creating things such as curbing and preventing people from going on certain roads and parking areas, and placing boulders, bollards, and creating a lot more boardwalks and maintain trails, and laying down tree debris for people is really helping keeping people on road, on trails, and streets and parking lots where they need to be, not veering off places where they're disturbing the environment. A lot of education is also being provided through signage and interpretation and educational programs through the National Park Service to help mitigate these negative impacts as well and help just prevent them. So the hope is that all these measures will really help diminish these impacts caused by modern day problems in high tourist volumes towards national parks that are being way beyond their carrying capacity limits. So moving on to the literature review, some negative impacts towards the environment are the main one being informal trails or people hiking off the trails, which is really starting to become prevalent in protected areas. Recreational hiking and hiking off trail really has a wide range of negative environmental impacts, being towards the soil, waterways, plant coverage, and wildlife even. So off-trail hiking is really starting to have impacts that include declines in plant coverage, composition, introduction of weeds, soil composition, hydrology and fragmentation problems. These are all just coming through people hiking off-trail or veering off the trail to get to a certain spot they want to see. So visitors hiking are really causing negative impacts on wildlife as well, being through trash, pollution, and noise. Hiking really causes disruptions towards natural wildlife, causing them to flee or go away by unwanted trash, pollution, or noise that they hear. So, additionally, hiking has really increased in Yosemite in recent years, with a 100% increase in the John Muir Trail permit requests from the national park system. So this high volume of tourism increases is increasing the prevalence rate of damage towards the ecosystem and wildlife, hydrology, adding erosion through the expansions of trails and everything. So, as you can see, like we just talked about, all these hiking damages are becoming very prevalent in areas where high permit requests like John Muir Trail are being requested. So Sequoia is also really having a lot of tourism harm caused to the National Park Service as well, being fire being prevented in the national park in order for visitor safety, but fire is needed for the germination of sequoia seeds. So without fire, how can the park spread and grow more trees? Huge negative impacts that tourism is just having on Sequoia by having more people around and not being able to have fires. So, moving on to the negative effect of overcrowding. In order to accommodate this high number of tourists and numbers in parks, human infrastructure must be really increased in recent years, with amenities being buildings and parkings and things such as that, and roads. So, all these improvements are really causing fragmentation, pollution, and disruption problems in the ecosystems and national parks. By building buildings, cutting into slopes, filling over wetland areas, going over streams, creating new streams, are all having negative impacts towards the environment and the wildlife within them. So, record numbers of vehicle entries for these national parks during their peak seasons are also very noticeable as well, being weekends and holidays. Long lines of cars at Sequoia stations, long lines of cars to wait in front of Sequoia and Yosemite at their entrance stations, lined back for hours and hours just to get into the park, where there's another problem of inadequate parking. So, and also just a result of these high vehicle numbers is just resulting in tons of more vehicle accidents and vehicle-related injuries towards animals and people as well. So, this visitor experience is really negatively impacted when parks really reach their maximum carrying capacities at all. None of these problems would be happening if not all these people would be coming all in just one massive wave or form. So, really damages to vegetation, damages to facilities and trails, extreme long wait times are all just negative effects of overcrowding. And if this does not stop, our Western National Parks are really going to start to become more urban areas, and they're really going to lose their spiritual elements. So, moving on to the pollution. Noise is really a huge pollution aspect in national parks, and is really becoming really prevalent in disturbing the natural soundscape. With voices, vehicles, aircraft, everything that has motor vehicles, it's really disrupting people's experiences in the natural wildlife at the time. So air quality is also a really bad part and a really growing pollution aspect in national parks, with ozone studies and levels indicating that a lot of national parks are really indistinguishable with their ozone levels from metropolitan areas. Automobiles emit a lot of ozone, and we see that tourism numbers are increasing with the number of automobiles entering with shuttles and cars, so we can expect that this ozone level is going to increase it well. It was also actually studied that the highest average ozone concentration in Sequoia was actually very closely related to the average ozone levels in the city of Los Angeles. So pretty bad correlations that we could be making through national parks and urban areas. So Light is also another really big really big aspect of pollution that is negatively impacting Western national parks by impacting people's night sky viewing as well as animals' sky viewing, and causing biological aspects to both human and wildlife. Light pollution really impacts both people biologically by making them more aggressive in not being able to see stars and fields at night and being angry, coming to a place and not being able to see what they want to see. Light pollution is giving animals higher risks of illness and diseases and reproductive diseases through in different levels of hormone rates through changes in the environment and different stresses in life. So as you can see, a lot of pollution aspects are really negatively impacting national parks and really need to be studied and worked towards more in recent years. So moving on to current applications. At Muir Woods National Monument, the National Park Service really noticing the overcrowding due to high volume tourist numbers, which has really led to unsafe and illegal parking and significant traffic congestions, negatively impacting visitor experiences and ecosystem damages. So public safety is really being put at risk for tons of people and mass crowds trying to enter these parks, where a lot of it is parking illegally and trying to drive in illegal spots and hiking in illegal areas as well. So Muirwood has really implemented a reservation parking and shuttle system, which limits the number of spaces that people can come into in a day, as well as limits the number of shuttles that come into the park as well. So after really implementing this system, this new system, there has really been a noticeable decrease with a 20% decrease in visitation at Muir Woods, decreasing from April 17th of 92,000 people to April 2018 to 72,000 people. So another study that has been done is a stewardship program at Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. The stewardship program was really implemented and is a robust program to manage the park's wilderness impacted by high tourist volumes. Plans are just aimed at decreasing negative impacts by addressing visitor capacity, party size, similarly to the other program, permitting campfire regulations, camping locations regulations, including food storage and waste management, and maintenance of facilities and trails. So keeping a maintenance of facilities and trails will keep people on trails more instead of trying to veer off more, and more regulations on campfires, where people can have campfires and put their food, where people can go, and just everything. So education of the park, of park visitors and staff is really going to be a critical component of this stewardship plan, and educational strategies are really being developed to help implement this. So some future recommendations that I think that can be done to really help preserve these parks for future generations to enjoy really include balancing of National Park Service goals with the environment, with environmental needs and tourism needs, observations of carrying capacities, restrictions of vehicle entries to a certain number, marketing off-season to have people come more in the winter seasons, and having seasonal fees being more expensive in the summer, less in the winter, to try and get people to change up their times to even it out. Education by National Park Service, especially by rangers, has really been shown to have really big impacts and really teach people what they really need to know. Leave no trace principles are always good things to know when going out into the environment, and also just like some other strategies, like things like trail maintenance to keep people on the trail more, and from veering off because the trail's too rutted or too rocky or something like that. So overall, in general, in Western State National Parks, the negative impacts tourism are really multiplied by high tourist volumes, making these parks increasingly vulnerable and putting them at very high risk. The positive aspects of tourism include revenue, production, social media, popularity, enjoyment, overshadow the negative impacts that tourism really has on the environment, people not seeing everything negative that is currently happening. So if we continue down the same pathway, there will really be consequential damage towards national parks and them becoming more of urban areas. So we should really continue implementing current strategies and future recommendation strategies and solutions in stewardship programs and things like that, etc., to really help evaluate the effectiveness of the to really help just national parks and the effectiveness of strategies taken overall. So national parks are really an iconic part of our recreational society as Americans, and with proper attention, we can really help sustain them for future generations and really be able to take advantage of the benefits